The World Health Organization says 12 years ago, India alone was responsible for almost 70% of all polio cases around the world. It calls India's success against polio one of the most significant achievements in public health. WHO officials say India's accomplishment proves the crippling disease can be eliminated in even the most challenging circumstances with a strong political commitment. The number of polio cases has decreased from an estimated 350,000 a year to 33 since the WHO launched its global eradication campaign in 1988.
The United States and South Korea announced late Saturday the two countries will end annual large-scale joint military exercises as part of diplomatic efforts to achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. In a statement, the Pentagon said Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan and South Korea's Minister of National Defense, in a phone call Saturday, decided to end the Key Resolve and Full Eagle series of exercises. The decision comes 3 days after a summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Vietnam that ended without an agreement to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis. Seoul's defense ministry released a similar statement, according to the Associated Press.
Spanish police say they've identified the driver of the van that mowed down crowds walking along Barcelona's main tourist street last Thursday, killing 13 people. They haven't named him, but he's understood to be Yunus Abu Yaqub, a 22-year-old born in Morocco. Police say he may have fled the country. A South African court has given permission for an online auction of rhino horns, despite a global trade ban. The authorities had tried to stop the 3-day auction. There's a great demand for rhino horns in Vietnam and China, where they're used in traditional medicines. The South African government has confirmed that it granted diplomatic immunity to Zimbabwe's First Lady, Grace Mugabe, enabling her to return home despite being accused of assaulting a model in Johannesburg. The government said it was imperative to maintain good relations with Zimbabwe.
You might picture Neanderthals as cavemen gnawing on bones around a campfire, which wouldn't be inaccurate. But Neanderthals may have also dined on roasted vegetables and known a bit about medicinal plants, too. So says a study in the journal Naturwissenschaften, the Science of Nature. Researchers analyzed hardened dental plaque from 5 Neanderthals found in El Cedrón cave in northern Spain. Yes, 50,000-year-old dental plaque. And they found a lot lurking between the teeth, like evidence of nuts, grasses, and green veggies, chemical traces of wood smoke, and tiny, intact starch granules, proof Neanderthals ate their carbs. In one individual, they detected compounds from the medicinal herbs chamomile and yarrow. The herbs have no nutritional value, and since Neanderthals did have the gene to detect the herb's bitter taste, the researchers speculate that the cave dwellers were munching on them not as food, but to self-medicate. Not too far-fetched, they say, because primates like chimps also use medicinal plants. Luckily for the scientists doing this detective work, Neanderthals may have known a thing or two about medicine, but they didn't get regular checkups at the dentist.
The Chukchi Sea lies between Alaska and Russia, just north of the Bering Strait. Shell Oil hopes to begin drilling in these Arctic waters in the next few days, if the U.S. government grants permission. The ship Noble Discoverer will drill 2 exploratory wells to determine what, if any, hydrocarbons are beneath the seabed, and how well drilling equipment can withstand the rigors of the far north. Those rigors include everything from swirling currents and floating ice chunks to migrating whales. There's coral there, too. Scientists sent to the region by Greenpeace have found sea raspberry, a soft, deep-sea species. Other such deep-sea corals bore the brunt of BP's catastrophic blowout in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. It remains to be seen whether offshore drilling in the Arctic can be any safer than drilling in balmier waters. Already, Russia spills some 30 million barrels of oil in the Arctic each year, and that's on land. Regardless, burning oil is one of the primary causes of climate change. Such global warming has thawed the Arctic above all, opening access to yet more oil. Humanity's thirst for oil has yet to gauge its own depths.
The eyes are the windows to the soul. As such, they can reveal if someone is lying, right? Cop shows, advice shows, even some organizational training courses hold that if somebody looks up and to the right, they're probably lying. Up and to the left means they're telling the truth. Now a study says that there is no connection between eye movement and lying. The work is in the journal Public Library of Science 1. Researchers tested eye movement and honesty in multiple ways. For example, they tracked the eye movements of subjects who were lying or telling the truth about things they had recently done. There was no correlation between lying and eye direction. The researchers also closely analyzed 52 archived news videos of real people making a public plea for the safe return of a missing relative. In half the videos, the plea was sincere, but in half there was strong evidence that the speaker was involved in the crime. Again, no eye movement clue was evident. So in judging the honesty of a speaker, remember, the eyes do not have it.
Being physically active has numerous benefits. Now a study has looked closely at the effects of fitness in the midlife years for preventing debilitating chronic diseases later. The ongoing study gathered fitness stats for more than 18,000 adults and followed their health status into old age. Assessing 40 years of that data, the analysis finds that those who had higher fitness levels in their 30s, 40s, and 50s were substantially less likely to have a chronic condition between the ages of 70 and 85. The findings are in the archives of internal medicine. Physical fitness seemed to stave off heart disease and heart failure, which might not be a big surprise, but it also reduced rates of diabetes, kidney disease, and even Alzheimer's disease. Current recommendations suggest adults make time for at least 20 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day, such as fast walking, jogging, biking, or swimming. Busy middle-aged people might find it especially hard to make time for such exercise, but a small investment looks like it could pay big health dividends for decades to come.
Sharing is one of the hallmarks of human behavior. Give me a cookie and I'm more likely to give you one later. But our bonobo cousins have an odd variation on the practice. They share with strangers before friends. The findings in the journal PLOS One. Researchers tested bonobo sharing in experiments involving 14 of the apes. All were born in the wild. In the primary experiment, bonobos were placed in a cage with food, and they could choose to admit either a known member of their group, a stranger, or both. In 51 trials, most bonobos shared the feast, but they let the stranger in first. Why choose an outsider over a friend? In another experiment, the scientists found bonobos only shared when doing so led to a social interaction. Giving up some food to strangers lets these apes expand their social network. This behavior may have evolved to promote social tolerance, in contrast with chimps' sometimes deadly aggression against strangers, which means that even when food is offered, there's still no such thing as a free lunch.
Ultraviolet rays don't just bronze sun seekers on the beach. Underwater, they can give hammerhead sharks a suntan, and worse, give fish skin cancer. So says a study in the journal PLOS One. Researchers caught 136 coral trout in the southern Great Barrier Reef. 15% of them had black lesions on their skin, melanoma. Pathogens, toxic chemicals, or UV rays can all cause melanoma, but DNA tests ruled out the presence of pathogens, and the fish were caught in the pristine waters of a marine sanctuary, so pollution wasn't to blame. Turns out the trout's cancer cells looked just like those of fish who'd been hit with UV radiation in the lab, so the researchers concluded that sunshine was the culprit. Makes sense, they say, because these trout live near the world's biggest hole in the ozone layer, meaning more exposure to UV rays. Another recent study, this one in the journal Science, says the severe storms delivered by climate change could punch new holes in the ozone layer, upping our dose of radiation on land and at sea. And that's no fish story.
Advertising and media companies often get lobbied to use models that represent the average woman's body, rather than ultra-thin models, whose images may influence some women to have an unhealthy relationship with food. Now, a study supports the idea that observed images affect what people consider to be acceptable body types. The report is in the journal PLOS One. Researchers surveyed subjects about their opinions of their own bodies and those of others. Then they presented the subjects with photos of large or thin women. Some photos were of beauty queens in evening gowns or other high-status clothing. Other photos were of women who were either very large or very thin, wearing just a neutral gray leotard. Following those viewings, the subjects were again surveyed about their body preferences. Subjects who originally preferred thin bodies only increased their preference for thinness after being shown photos of thin women. But they decreased their preference for thin bodies after being shown photos of larger women. And the attire of the women in the photos made no difference to the subject's latter preference. The researchers say that this study provides strong evidence that images of female bodies promoted by the media and ad agencies could have, indeed, a real impact on women's preference and subsequent thoughts about body type.
Medicinal tablets are nothing new. Doctors have been dispensing pills for thousands of years. And now archaeologists have turned up some of those ancient medicines, which were preserved in a shipwreck for close to 2 millennia. The 2nd century Pozzino wreck was discovered in 1974 off the coast of Italy. Its cargo included medical equipment, like a cupping vessel, iron probe, and tin boxes of supplies. And in one of those boxes, researchers recovered 5 gray tablets. Now, they've analyzed the antique medication. The work is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The pills primarily contain zinc compounds, probably the active medicinal ingredients, but researchers also detected starch, pollen, charcoal, fats, and linen fibers. Those fibers help the tablets hold their round, loaf-like shape, which may be the key to the medication's use. The Greek word meaning small round loaves also inspired the word collyrium, or eye wash. The pills were probably either dissolved in liquid or ground into a powder and used to treat eye conditions. Who knows? Maybe Hippocrates used them on his pupils.
Unless you're at a Chaucer convention, speaking Middle English is not going to impress a potential romantic partner in 2013. Similarly, male savanna sparrows have to make sure their vocalizations are up to date. Researchers analyzed 3 decades of recordings of male savanna sparrows, and birds that changed their tune over the years did better with the ladies. The research is in the journal Animal Behavior. While introductory notes of the sparrow song stayed the same, the middle and end parts changed over time. In the 1980s, songs concluded with longer, high-pitched trills. More recent songs contain a series of clicks in the middle and a shorter, low-pitched trill at the end. Researchers found that the male sparrows that adopted the newer songs had higher rates of sexual reproduction, because you don't want to be seen as behind the times. Indeed, Chaucer might have had his pick of the ladies in the 14th century, but few today can make heads or tails of his tales.
Last week on the podcast, we talked about space health. Specifically, we told you about a new paper discussing the role that physicians will have to play in determining which citizens are fit enough for commercial jaunts into space. Now let's leap ahead and much farther afield. What kinds of issues might a crew of astronauts face on a longer journey, say a round trip to Mars? To find out, 6 volunteers spent a record 520 days confined to a simulated space habitat near Moscow. They emerged in 2011. Now a report in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences shows that the simulated spaceflight did have real effects. Removed from natural light and the rhythms of everyday life, 4 crew members experienced some type of sleep disturbance, and 1 exhibited signs of chronic sleep deprivation during regular alertness tests. Overall, the crew also became more sedentary with time. The researchers conclude that a real Mars mission would need to incorporate tactics such as timed light exposure or exercise to keep astronauts' circadian rhythms on beat, because it would be a bad idea to land on Mars sleepy and out of shape.
We have ignition. We have liftoff.
Let's say you've saved up $200,000 for a trip to space with Virgin Galactic. Lucky you. But are you healthy enough to fly? You'll have to talk with your doctor. A new study in the BMJ outlines the role that general practitioners will have to play in commercial spaceflight. After all, astronauts typically have to be in tip-top shape, but opening the door to the paying public means that less healthy individuals will soon have access to space too. And the stress of spaceflight, combined with the negative effects of weightlessness on muscle and bone, could cause real problems. It may be up to your personal physician to make the go, no-go call based on your medical history. Among the potential hypotheticals floated in the BMJ study, can my patient with stable angina and a pacemaker for complete heart block participate in a suborbital Virgin Galactic flight? What is the maximum allowable time that my patient with osteoporosis can spend on a planned vacation at a space hotel? There are no official answers, yet, but the study's authors note that such questions may be in the air, or lack thereof, in the not-too-distant future.
Beneath its adorable exterior, is your cat hiding the heart of a killer? Researchers now estimate that each year, domestic cats kill billions of birds and mammals in the United States alone. The report is in Nature Communications. We already knew that domestic cats can wreak havoc on islands, causing 14% of species extinctions and ranking as one of the world's 100 worst invasive species. But now, scientists have reviewed previous studies to find just how much damage cats do on the mainland. Cats kill some 1.4 to 3.7 billion birds and 6.9 to 20.7 billion small mammals in the U.S. each year. These numbers mean that felines may be the biggest human-related cause of death for American birds and mammals. And cats tend to prey on native species, which can cause major ecosystem damage. The worst feline killers are those without owners, and reducing feral cat populations is an ongoing problem, but you can still reduce the impact of domestic cats by keeping your pet indoors, thus leaving the neighborhood a little less red in tooth and claw. People with asthma, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and other breathing disorders need fast relief when their airways tighten up. Unfortunately, the most commonly used medication has obnoxious side effects, but scientists recently discovered that a bitter taste can be a more effective treatment, and now they know why. The work is published in PLOS Biology. When an asthma attack hits, the airway shrinks and makes breathing difficult. To keep air flowing, the sufferer must take medication to relax the passage's muscles and open it back up. But a couple years ago, researchers discovered airways contain bitter taste receptors like the ones on the tongue. After exposure to bitter substances, the receptors can expand the airway more quickly and more effectively than the most commonly used treatment. Researchers examined airway tissue to learn why bitterness makes the muscles relax. During an asthma attack, calcium flows into the cells of the airway and contributes to muscle contraction. But bitter substances block the channels that allow calcium into cells, which relaxes the tightened tissue. And that's the opposite of a bitter pill.
What's the first thing you do when you get to a hotel room? Turn on the light, kick off your shoes, and turn on the tube? If so, congratulations! You've likely just made a quick tour of the places in the room that harbor the most bacteria. Sure, there are a lot of bacteria in the bathroom, but that's not the hottest spot for bugs. Some of the highest concentrations of microbes were on the light switch, the carpet, and the television remote. The findings were presented at the American Society for Microbiology's 2012 General Meeting. The researchers sampled 18 surfaces from 9 hotel rooms in 3 different states. They found that 81% of those surfaces had at least some fecal bacteria on them. But of course, not all of these bugs are going to make you sick. The study was in part to help inform cleaning protocols. Some hotel chains are already pledging to keep their properties a little more germ-free, so your next stay might be a little cleaner. Just don't investigate CSI style with a black light. You'll never be able to sleep.
In planet formation, as in adolescence, you've got your late bloomers. Such is the case for a nearby star called TW Hydra. At some 3 million to 10 million years of age, it's relatively old for a young star. That is, TW Hydra formed much more recently than our Sun, but is past the point at which most fledgling stars are still encircled by a massive disk of gas and dust, the stuff of planet formation. But a new analysis shows that TW Hydra retains a surprisingly hefty circumstellar disk, implying that the star could still be forming giant planets. The study appears in the journal Nature. Researchers from the US, Germany, and the Netherlands pointed the European Space Agency's orbiting Herschel Space Observatory at TW Hydra to investigate the star's disk. They detected levels of a heavy hydrogen molecule called hydrogen deuteride. From that measurement, they were able to estimate the abundance of ordinary hydrogen, which makes up the bulk of the disk. The result? TW Hydra still has enough raw material left to make 60 Jupiters or so, despite its maturity. For aging stars, then, perhaps 10 million is the new 30.
A lot of people just don't feel quite human without that morning cup of coffee. Now a study finds that the enhanced sense of well-being that caffeine can cause is reflected in our perception of words. Specifically, caffeine increases the ability to recognize words associated with positive thoughts, but doesn't quite provide the same boost for words with negative or even neutral associations. The research is in the journal PLOS One. Scientists assigned 66 subjects to one of two groups. Half got a 200 milligram caffeine tablet, a dose equal to almost 3 cups of coffee. The other half received a sugar tablet. 30 minutes later, the volunteers were shown strings of letters and had to decide as fast as they could if a string formed a word or was just gibberish. The volunteers recognized words with positive associations much, much faster than either negative or neutral words. Other studies have shown that positive words tend to be recognized more quickly, but the caffeine increases the gap. So next time you wake up with a grumpy sweetheart, your compliments might be appreciated more if they have a cup of coffee first.
Roosters greet the rising sun with, but they also crow at other times. So are they responding to the light, or do they simply know that it's morning? New research says the latter. Roosters crow because of internal time cues. The finding is in the journal Current Biology. Scientists controlled the light levels in rooster habitats. For 2 weeks, the birds experienced 12 hours of light followed by 12 hours of dim light. Consistent with the pre-dawn noises observed in wildfowl, the roosters began to crow about 2 hours before their rooms lit up. Then, for 2 weeks, the roosters lived in constant dim light, yet they continued to crow about once a day, at intervals of 23.7 hours to be precise. Even without morning light, their circadian rhythms told them when dawn should be breaking. The birds also crowed in response to sudden light and to the sounds of other roosters, but they were more likely to react when those stimuli occurred near dawn, showing that you can't really keep a rooster in the dark about the time.